Hi, everybody. Al Bernstein here with another one of my quick hits. And on this particular quick hit, I'm going to talk about a couple of boxers who are on the surface very different. They come from different countries. They're in different weight divisions, but it's their similarities and what they both bring to the sport of boxing that I want to highlight and talk about. And one of the reasons I want to talk about it is we are constantly in the sport confronted with, especially here in the United States, questions by the mainstream media, sports mainstream media about boxing as a whole. Why is it more of a niche sport? Are there enough talented fighters? Is that what the problem is? Why aren't the great matches made as much as they should be? All of those kinds of questions. Of course, my view is that boxers today are extremely talented. Their weight divisions are littered with talented, interesting men who could be superstars, especially here in the United States, if they had the exposure, if they fought a little more often, and if the right matches were made to create them into superstars. This problem does not exist in places like the UK, where boxing has had a huge uptick and where fighters have been matched in big fights. Boxing fans have been well informed and the sport has thrived, and in other parts of the world as well. But in the United States, for the most part, is where a lot of this has happened. And so I want to talk about two fighters to show that there are people in the sport right now who are entertaining and skilled and deserve fans' attention and deserve the kind of build-up and treatment by those who run boxing to make sure that we see them on a regular basis. The first one I want to talk about is a young man who fights in the 154-pound division. His name is Demetrius Andrade. He's undefeated. He was a champion, a former champion. He ended up losing his championship because of inactivity, and that was because of a lot of boxing politics and decisions that were made, possibly by his team and by others, that made him inactive. Again, an indication of some of the issues that sometimes face boxing. But once he got back into fighting, and recently I did his fight against Willie Nelson, in which he fought extraordinarily well. He has done very well. But first, let's look at his pedigree. This is a young man who, as an amateur, had a glittering record. You see the accomplishments, the people he fought, what he did as an amateur. He was staggeringly good as an amateur fighter. And that led him into the pro ranks, where he created that excellent record. And then comes the Willie Nelson fight as his last fight. Willie Nelson, a very fine 154-pounder, in which Andrade reminded all of us what he is all about. He is a lefty who is an exceptional boxer, but a lefty who likes to mix it up, who will go after his opponent, who makes his fights interesting and makes them fun and makes action a part of his lexicon. And when he does so, he doesn't do it as a brawler. He does it as a boxer puncher. And who's like him? Who's a fighter that reminds me of Andrade? A man from across the pond who fights in a different weight division, is a world champion. He fights at 168, and his name is James DeGale. And I have been privileged also to do a number of James DeGale's fights, first on Channel 5 in England, where I was broadcasting, and then, of course, on Showtime. His only loss was to George Groves in a very close fight early in his career. And he's a fighter who, like Andrade, is a lefty. He has supreme boxing skills, but especially in recent fights, now that he's been healthy after some injury issues, he creates exciting fights. Now, his amateur pedigree exceeds even Andrade. As a gold medalist in 2008 for Great Britain, he was a fantastic amateur, and that led him to a very good pro career. And as I said early in his career, he was spotless except for that loss to George Groves, and George Groves is a very good fighter. And then he ultimately won the title, and you see his take a look at his last three opponents, which will show you the level he's been fighting at. Andre Durrell, Lucien Boutte, the former champion, and Rogelio Medina. And here's what I want to say about especially the last two fights. The last two fights that James DeGale has had, in my opinion, are almost like fight of the year candidates. He could have probably, against both Boutte and Medina, chosen to use solely his boxing skills, stayed on the outside, and won a less than scintillating match. He didn't. He has turned himself into or gone back to being a fighter who will attack. He uses his boxing skills, but puts himself in harm's way a little bit more than maybe at certain points early in his career. And what it's creating are wildly exciting fights in which he ends up winning. Now, he and Andrade have that in common. They're fun to watch. I mean, really fun to watch. And they're not huge knockout punchers, though they both have power. And so their fights create action. They don't end in one round. And the reason I picked out these two fighters to talk about is to point out that in boxing, we have skilled athletes. We have some fighters who are fantastic, terrific. The level of talent today in boxing is very, very, very good. These two men are men who probably haven't fought as often as they would like, though DeGale recently has been more active, and Andrade now is hoping to be more active after the Nelson fight in a 154-pound division that is very, very competitive, and all of the 154-pounders look like they're going to fight each other, and that is going to be spectacular, and Andrade will be right in the mix of that. So we need to see men like this more often in the sport, more than just once or twice a year, hopefully at least 3 times a year. And we need to have them be known to the public. We need to have fighters like this get the kind of coverage and attention that they should get because they're excellent athletes. And so for me, when I see either of these two men are going to fight, I am all in. And they are not lone wolves. They are an example of a pretty deep roster in the sport of boxing. They're simply my poster kids for that I picked out today. So we'll see. Coming up, James DeGale is supposed to fight Badou Jack. I hope that happens. Badou Jack's a very, very talented fighter, who, by the way, is in the same category. Badou Jack could have been in this list, but I chose to focus in on two fighters because he's a very active fighter who's making very good fights and fights with a style that creates very exciting fights as well. And he and DeGale could be, in my opinion, an epic match. And as I mentioned for Andrade, we are very likely to see him in against any number of 154-pounders, either of the Charlo twins, J-Rock Williams, depending on what happens with Williams and Charlo when they fight, Arislandi Lara. You could name a number of 154-pounders that he might be facing in the future. So I'm hoping that all that happens. And as boxing fans, we should want it and demand it in a way. But for this Quick Hits, my goal is to put to rest this idea that you can't find fighters who are both entertaining and skilled who you want to see, because these two are prime examples.